It's during the summer months, especially, that most everyone, at least here in the Midwest, looks forward to taking a little vacation time. I enjoyed a few days earlier this week myself, and I'm looking forward to a little longer one next month. But that need to occasionally retreat from our normal daily life, that's something that's part of being a human being. It's kind of the way God created us. After all, even the Father himself, even God himself, rested on the seventh day, didn't he? Back in the spring of 1730, there was a young priest in Naples, Italy, who was exhausted by the almost nonstop work he was doing in his parish. And so his spiritual director recommended him to get away for a little while, to get a little bit of rest. So the young priest gathered up a small group of close friends, other young priests, and they headed off for the tranquility of the Amalfi Coast, a beautiful place to vacation. Once they arrived there, a local friend suggested that they should go further up the nearby mountain to a little place called Scala, where they'd be able to see the beauty of God's creation all around them and enjoy some real peace and quiet in that small little out-of-the-way town. So the group headed up the mountain. But when they arrived at that small village of Scala, word spread about their presence. And so the local people, the local villagers, were soon joined by a large group of shepherds that came in from the fields to see who these visitors were to their small little corner of the world. Well, it wasn't long before this young priest and his friends discovered that these friendly and simple folks had never really been taught a whole lot about the faith. And so what had started out as a vacation for them instead became a mission of sorts. And they began to evangelize the people of Scala, to tell them all the good news about Jesus Christ. And that was the beginning of a new missionary order in the church called the Redemptorists, founded by that same young priest, Alphonsus Liguori, St. Alphonsus Liguori. Now, if you're wondering, I did not have to found a new missionary order in Indiana last week when I was on vacation, huh? In our gospel today, Jesus, too, is trying to help his little group of friends get away for a while for some peace and some quiet and some rest. You know, they're exhausted by all the work they've been doing in his name. And so he tells them, come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. But no sooner have they put their boat ashore than they're surrounded by a growing crowd of simple folks who are hungry not only for food, but more importantly, for the good news that only Jesus can give them. In other words, what had started out as a little vacation of sorts for them, for the disciples, had instead become a mission. As we heard, when Jesus saw the crowd, he was deeply moved because they seemed to be lost, vulnerable. He said they're like sheep without a shepherd. Even though most of us here probably have never actually met a shepherd, we've heard enough about them in scriptures over the years to know just how important and dangerous their work really has been. Without their guidance, the sheep are inevitably going to wander off, away from safety. They're going to endanger themselves. They're going to make themselves vulnerable to attack or being taken advantage of. So it's up to the shepherd of the flock to find safe pastures for them. And in the ancient Middle East, when a shepherd would pen in his flock for the evening, he would actually lay down across the opening of the pen, literally laying down his life to protect his sheep. Of course, to this day, there are many, many people in our world, individuals and groups of people too, that are sort of like sheep without a shepherd. They're easy prey for others who want to take advantage of them. And it shouldn't be that way, of course, right? It shouldn't be that way, because everyone deserves to be loved, to be cared for, to be looked after. In other words, everyone needs a shepherd. Everyone needs a shepherd. Without the protection and guidance and love of a shepherd, we'd all be lost, every one of us. Now, when it comes to living then a faithful, holy, and virtuous life, a life that points us in the direction of the pastures of heaven, that shepherd, of course, is Jesus Christ himself. And he shepherds us to this very day through his church. But the world and the devil persistently tempt us and encourage us to stray from the path that Jesus has set out before us through his church. And when we give in to that temptation, the pressures we feel from the changing whims of the society and world around us, when we wander from the path, well, then we make ourselves vulnerable to people and forces that really don't have our best interests at heart, that only want to take advantage of us and use us for their own selfish ends. So it's only by staying on the path laid out by Christ through his church, through the sacraments in particular, that we'll find the life that truly sustains us, that nourishes us, that protects us. Now, of course, people in our world are vulnerable in other ways too, aren't they? Not just in the temptation to give in to abandoning the moral life. Unborn children, young children who are exploited or abandoned, the sick, the suffering, the elderly, the imprisoned, the terminally ill, the lonely, the handicapped, the homeless, the forgotten, the unloved, and on and on and on. It's so easy for people to fall through the cracks in our world, to be ignored by our modern world. And again, we know that it should never be that way. It should never be that way, because everyone deserves to be loved and to be cared for and to be looked after. We are all God's children, aren't we? We are all his sheep, made in his image and likeness, equally loved, equally adored by the same Father in heaven. And that means that on some level, we all have to be involved in the work of shepherding. All of us do. As the old saying goes, I am my brother, I am my sister's keeper. In other words, when I see someone in need, as a disciple of Christ, as a member of his little band of friends, it should provoke some kind of response in me, some kind of response. You know, Jesus could have turned that boat around just as easily and taken the disciples somewhere else where there was no crowd, where they could really rest. Alphonsus Liguori and his friends, they could have told the people of Scala, sorry, we're on vacation. There's nothing we can do for you right now. But to do that would have been to close their hearts to real human need. Now, we all know folks in our own lives that need someone to reach out to them, to care for them, to offer some kind of encouragement and guidance. Folks who are lost or vulnerable or forgotten in some way. You and I are constantly being called as disciples of Jesus, not only to faithfully follow the path in front of us, but to care for others along that path too, to imitate the love and the concern of the Good Shepherd himself. So we all have to ask ourselves, this weekend and always, of course, who do I know that needs that kind of care? Who do I know that needs that kind of care? I probably won't have to look very far for an answer.